image that little African-American children are given, and Africans all over the world are given, is that their ancestors took it lying down. They didn't fight back. They just kind of caved in, and not only caved in, but kind of happy to cave in. So the happy darky was the image that I saw when I was a little child in movies and textbooks and things like that. The fact was that there were fierce, and there continues to be, fierce fighting and fierce resistance to any kind of domination of African people.
No people in history wanted to see their heritage destroyed, their cities burned, their accomplishments ignored, and their people carried away into perpetual slavery. Such a people would have died out long ago.
From the very time that we were captured or traded on the western shores of Africa to the slave ship captains, we resisted slavery. Dotting the coast of West Africa are these slave castles, the ruins of which exist to this day. And we were penned in there, and some of us always tried to escape from those slave castles. On the way to the ships, we tried to escape, usually our efforts ending in death or maiming or serious injury. Once on board, we resisted slavery emotionally and psychologically. Many of us slipped into melancholia so deep that we died on board. Others jumped into the murky Atlantic to face the sharks rather than to be slaves. Pregnant African women took sharpened bamboo shoots, shoved them into their bellies to kill that child rather than have that child be born a slave. Black people never did like being slaves. And those of us who survived that terrible Middle Passage, as described by the accurate historians, when we landed at the points of entry, Charleston, New Orleans, and other places, our first item on our agenda was to try to be free. That usually ending in serious injury or death.
The history of African people has been told mainly as if it began in slavery. And there's nothing before that. And then the history of African people after slavery is equally distorted because it's fragmented. So that the problem of African history is the absence of holism, the absence of a sense of continuity, the absence of a sense of contextualism. In other words, things took place in a context at a particular time for reasons to people as a whole. And so we normally don't get people history as African people. We get person history as African people. And we need to know as a group how we emerged on the earth, progressed through time, were influenced and influenced other people. And that means that we have to have a change in the way slavery history and after is taught, but we must also link the history of African people to the periods prior to that.
In this segment of our 10-part series, we're going to talk specifically about African resistance. Now, to do that, we have to take you back a couple of hundred years before the start of slavery and introduce you to this. What you're watching is not karate, jiu-jitsu, kung fu, or anything Asian. It's capoeira. It's the oldest martial art form in the world, and as Dr. Robert Ferris Thompson of Yale University explains, it originated in Africa.
All the kids in your schools go to see Bruce Lee and other martial art films. They go to see Van Damme. But it's little known that the black world has its own martial art, and that's what I'd like to talk about. Capoeira, the black martial art of Brazil and its origins, the black martial arts of Angola and Congo, and its cognate expressions among the blacks of Martinique, Laja, that the great Catherine Dunham was the first to elucidate and wrote about as early as 1938, and then some other touches. I'm going to show you that it's the only martial art in the world done to music. It's a disguised as dance. It's an incredible tradition, capoeira of black Brazil. I'll show you some of the moves. I'll show you how they relate to call and response in African-American performance. I'll show you the basic step, the ginga. I'll show you variants like the spider hit. I'll show you head blows. I'll show you the one leg out and one leg bent, negativa. And I'll show you how that relates to black Congo writing. I'll show you the blessing step, which comes forward, and how you do a cartwheel black style. I'll show you the banana tree move and the flight of the wild bat. What is capoeira? It is a unique martial art in the Black Atlantic world, unique in that it's performed to music. And you can see the instrument that's performed to on the left, the musical bow, which is surely one of the oldest instruments on the planet. And that musical bow jumps to Brazil, as you can see on the right, with the young athlete who takes the musical bow, puts it against his stomach and resonates that string in a certain way that has haunting syllables like gung, 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 gung. This ties in with the origin of black North American music because the diddley bows, Bo Diddley just reversed it, get it? The diddley bow of the Black Delta, the techniques of running your finger up and down that string went right into one of the nation musics of this country, the blues.
Like everything else African, capoeira adapted itself in the Americas. Slaves in South America developed a way to use this form of martial arts to fight while chained together. They honed their skills so well that any black person seen practicing capoeira in Brazil during the slave era was shot on sight. Dr. Thompson says the martial art of capoeira also survived in North America and uses pictures to support his claim.
Many of you have read that marvelous book, Dry Long So, by Professor Gwaltney, and in it there is a reference to knockin' and kickin', the North American black martial art, which was practiced here on the soil of Georgia and in North Carolina and many other places. Knockin' and kickin', as you might have guessed, had to do with knocking with your head and kicking with your feet.
Now, we just told you the African slaves of Brazil evolved capoeira into a deadly art form, but they did more than that. Thousands of blacks in Brazil and the Caribbean successfully fought slavery. In places such as Suriname and parts of Jamaica and the Caribbean, they established their own cities and armies. Articles by Joseph Williams of Boston in 1938 and Douglas Hall in the same year documented their existence. They were called Maroons. Pockets of Maroons still live in these areas today. According to information from Alan Toulon, printed in the October 1976 issue of the Caribbean Journal, that's because their battle skills were so effective, the British and other colonial rulers had to give up fighting them and sign treaties such as this one. These treaties allowed the escaped slaves to live peaceful, independent, and free lives. The Treaty of 1739 between the Maroons and the colonists had 15 separate points. Among them, point 1, all hostilities would cease. Point number 2, that the Maroons would live in a perfect state of freedom and liberty, that they would enjoy and possess all lands lying between Trelawney Town and the Cockpits, which included 1,500 acres. Point number 4, that the Maroons would have the liberty to plant said lands with coffee, cocoa, ginger, tobacco, and cotton, and to breed cattle, hogs, goats, and any other manner of produce, and to sell such produce. Point number 7 showed just how much the British respected the Maroons and their military skills. It called for the Maroons to side with the British in case the Jamaican island was ever invaded. Now remember, this treaty was signed in blood, March 1st, 1739, decades before the American founding fathers began writing documents of independence. Maroon society had just gotten a toehold in the United States when a brilliant move of treachery scrambled their plans. Dr. Hilliard says this literally frustrated the freedom for two groups of